Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Daniel always believed fatherhood would be the defining moment of his life. It was the bedrock of his ambitions. Since he was a boy, he'd watched his own father, a mechanic whose hands were always stained with grease, but whose presence was always clean, always absolute. The way he could fix an engine, then come inside and fix a broken toy with the same focused patience. That was the man Daniel wanted to be. He grew up in the suburbs of Seattle, the son of working-class parents who taught him the value of honesty and hard work. They didn't have much, but their home was solid, built on a foundation of respect. That shaped Daniel. He knew exactly what he stood for, the kind of family he was meant to lead. He was a financial analyst, a man of numbers, of patterns, of logical conclusions. He saw the world in spreadsheets and predictable outcomes. And then he met Chloe. It was 5 years ago. Chloe Vance, 31 years old, a public relations specialist for a high-end design firm. He saw her at a gallery opening in Pioneer Square. She was holding a glass of white wine, debating modern art with an intensity that drew everyone in. She had that spark, that vibrant energy that made a gray Seattle evening feel bright. She was beautiful, of course, but it was her mind, the way she constructed an argument, the way her laughter cut through the dull murmur of the room, that captured him. Their chemistry was immediate, undeniable. In those first few months, they were inseparable. They hiked the trails near Mount Rainier until their legs ached, spent rainy weekends getting lost in the labyrinth of Pike Place Market, and talked for hours, building a world that belonged only to them. The proposal came 2 years later. It was simple, just as he'd planned it. He cooked her favorite pasta, lit candles, and with the soft sound of rain against the window, he got down on one knee. He asked her to build a life with him. She cried. She said yes. And that night, they mapped out their future. Marriage, a house with a view of the Sound, children, growing old. Everything was falling into place, a perfectly balanced ledger. The wedding was small, elegant, at a winery outside the city. It was perfect. And soon after, they began trying for a child. It was the next logical step, the dream they had spoken of since their first serious conversations. But life, as he learned, rarely adheres to a plan. The first few years were a quiet, grinding frustration. Cycles of hope followed by the stark, clinical reality of disappointment. Doctors' appointments became a routine. Tests, charts, the cold, monthly tide of expectation that always receded, leaving the shore barren. Daniel held on to hope. He told her it was just a matter of time. He was the rock, the steady hand. Chloe, she handled it differently. He remembered her silence, a cold, almost professional detachment. She didn't like to show vulnerability. She never cried in front of him, never opened up about the ache of it all. She just moved forward, month after month, as if it were a difficult PR crisis to be managed, an obstacle to overcome with strategy rather than emotion. He respected her strength, he told himself. But sometimes, in the dead of night, he missed a deeper connection. He felt alone in their shared struggle. After 3 years of trying, it finally happened. The test was positive. Daniel saw the 2 faint lines, and he wept. He hugged Chloe so tightly she let out a small, breathless laugh, and told him to be careful. She cried too, but in her way, restrained, as if she couldn't quite allow herself to believe it. The 9 months that followed were a blur of intense preparation. Daniel's preparation. He was there for every appointment, every ultrasound. He stared at the grainy black and white image on the screen, his heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost hurt. This was real. This was his son. He read every parenting book he could find. He watched videos, talked to friends who were already fathers. He meticulously prepared the nursery. He painted the walls a soft gray, assembled the crib with the focus of a surgeon, following every single instruction. He organized the tiny clothes by size and color. Diapers, bottles, educational toys, everything was in its place. The house was ready. He was ready. And then, just 3 days before the due date, the first crack appeared in the foundation he had so carefully built. It was a Saturday morning. The rare Seattle sun streamed through the kitchen windows, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. Daniel was at the stove, making scrambled eggs. He could smell coffee brewing. It was a perfect domestic scene. The baby's name will be Rowan. Daniel froze, spatula in hand. He turned to her, a confused smile faltering on his face. Rowan? he repeated, the name feeling foreign and strange on his tongue. But we always talked about Samuel. For my grandfather, you said you loved it. You said it was strong, classic. Chloe shook her head, a new firmness in her jaw. I've changed my mind. Rowan is perfect. It's modern. It fits. I want his name to be Rowan. There was something in her voice, a defensiveness he couldn't place. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a decree. He tried to reason with her, his voice calm and steady. Chloe, honey, I understand changing your mind, but we've discussed this for months. Samuel means something to me, to my family. It's a way of honoring the man who taught me what it means to be a good father. Her voice rose, sharper than he was used to. Daniel, I have carried this baby for 9 months. I have dealt with the morning sickness, the back pain, the exhaustion. I think I have the right to choose his name, and I want it to be Rowan. End of story. She pushed herself up from the table and walked out of the kitchen, leaving him standing there in the sunlit room, a strange, cold feeling coiling in his gut. It wasn't just about the name. It was the way she'd said it. The sudden, absolute refusal to discuss it. The aggressive tone. The Chloe he knew was stubborn. Yes, but she was always open to a conversation, a debate. This was different. This was a wall. In the days that followed, she brought it up again and again, always insisting, always with that same unwavering resolve. And every time Daniel tried to understand why, she'd get irritated. She'd accuse him of being pushy, of not respecting her feelings. That's when the silent alarm in his head started blaring. And he began to notice other things. Small details, insignificant on their own, but together they formed a pattern. A spreadsheet of doubt. Her phone, which used to lie casually on the coffee table, was now always face down. When it buzzed, she would snatch it up, leaving the room to answer, closing the bedroom door behind her. There were the frequent outings, always with a plausible excuse. A last-minute client meeting downtown, drinks with an old colleague she had to see before the baby came, handling some work issue that couldn't wait, and the new perfume. He noticed it because it was so different from her usual light, floral scent. This was something else, woody, earthy, something she only wore on certain days when she was heading out alone. It was the scent of a secret. Then there was the distant look in her eyes. Even when he was talking directly to her, about the baby, about their future, her mind was somewhere else. He could see it. He was talking to a ghost. Daniel wasn't the type to let doubt fester. His nature was direct, practical. When a number didn't add up in a financial report, you didn't ignore it. You investigated. You found the source of the discrepancy. You acted. So, one Monday morning, after Chloe kissed him goodbye, saying she was heading out for a final appointment with their doula, Daniel picked up his phone. He looked up the contact for a private investigator a coworker had mentioned years ago, in a hushed, bitter conversation about his own divorce. He made the call. Some people would call it an extreme measure, an invasion of privacy, a betrayal of trust. But Daniel saw it differently. Trust had already been betrayed. This wasn't about snooping. This was about survival. It was about finding the truth before his entire world, the world he had so carefully constructed, imploded. He explained the situation to the investigator, a man named Marcus with a gravelly voice and a weary, seen-it-all demeanor. Daniel was clear, concise, without emotion. He needed to know where his wife was going, who she was meeting, and he needed to know fast. Before the baby was born, Marcus said he could have something in 48 hours. Daniel agreed without hesitation. There was no room for doubt anymore. If he was wrong, he would spend the rest of his life making it up to Chloe, admitting his paranoia. But if he was right, he needed to know before it was too late. The next 2 days were the longest of his life. He went to work, stared at spreadsheets, the numbers blurring into meaningless squiggles. He came home, rubbed Chloe's swollen feet, asked about her day, and played the part of the devoted husband. But inside, he was a man holding his breath, waiting for a verdict. On Wednesday afternoon, his phone rang. It was Marcus. His voice was flat, professional. I have the material. We should meet in person. This isn't something you want to see over email. Daniel's stomach turned to ice. He left work early, mumbling an excuse to his boss. He met Marcus at a discreet coffee shop in Belltown, far from his usual haunts. The investigator was sitting at a small table in the back, a plain brown envelope in front of him. When Daniel sat down, Marcus didn't waste time on pleasantries. He opened the envelope and laid a series of glossy photos on the table. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs in a silent rush. The images were perfectly clear. Chloe, sitting at an outdoor cafe, just a few blocks away. She was leaning across the table, talking to a man. The photos showed them laughing. One showed his hand covering hers. Their faces were close, their body language intimate. This wasn't a client meeting. There was also a short video, discreetly recorded. Marcus handed him a pair of earbuds. Daniel put them in, his hands trembling slightly, and pressed play. He heard Chloe's voice, unmistakable, saying things that felt like shards of glass in his ears. "I just wonder what would have happened if we'd been brave enough back then." The man's reply was muffled, but his tone was gentle, knowing. Full of a shared history that Daniel was not a part of. Daniel didn't need to see any more. He pulled the earbuds out, the silence of the coffee shop rushing back in. He picked up one of the photos. "Who is he?" His voice was a raw whisper. Marcus had already done the work. He opened a thin folder. Rowan Hayes, 32 years old, a landscape designer, runs a small firm here in Seattle. The name hit Daniel like a physical blow. "Rowan," Marcus continued, his voice dispassionate. "He's her ex-boyfriend. They dated for about a year, broke up shortly before she met you. From what I gathered, they've had sporadic contact, but the meetups became regular about 4 months ago. Looks like she was the one who reached out first." A brutal, sickening clarity washed over Daniel. It all made sense now. The name, the inexplicable, desperate insistence, the defensiveness. She wanted to name his son after her lover. It was a betrayal so profound, so symbolic, he could barely process the audacity of it. He gathered the photos, paid Marcus in cash, and walked out of the coffee shop into the gray afternoon, a hollow chasm where his heart used to be. He got in his car but didn't start the engine. He just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching the traffic flow by. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just felt a cold, clean anger. The kind that burns silently, with purpose. He pulled out his phone, found Rowan Hayes' business number online, and dialed. A man's voice answered, laced with a mild confusion. "Rowan Hayes Designs." Daniel got straight to the point. His voice was low, steady, devoid of heat. "Is this the Rowan who has been meeting with Chloe Thorne?" Silence on the other end. Then, a hesitant, "Who is this?" "I'm her husband," Daniel said. "And we need to talk. In person." The man, Rowan, started to stammer, to make excuses. Daniel cut him off. "If you don't show up, I'll take these photographs to your clients, to your professional partners. I doubt they'd be thrilled to learn about your involvement with a married woman who is 9 months pregnant." He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "You choose. Tomorrow, 5 p.m., my house. I'll text you the address. If you're not there, the consequences are yours." He hung up before Rowan could respond. There was no room for negotiation. He was in control now. That night, he went home. He found Chloe on the living room couch, watching TV, her feet propped up. She smiled when she saw him, a light, easy smile that now looked grotesque, a mask of deceit. "Long day?" she asked. Daniel dropped his briefcase by the door. He took off his jacket and sat in the armchair across from her. He just watched her, his silence a heavy, suffocating blanket. She noticed the change in his eyes, the tension in the air. Did something happen at work? He shook his head slowly. "We need to talk tomorrow. It's important." "Can't we talk now?" she asked, a flicker of unease in her eyes. "No," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Tomorrow." He went upstairs, locked their bedroom door behind him, and spent the night methodically planning every detail of what was to come. There was no room for error. He needed a confession. He needed a confrontation. He needed her to understand that the game was over. The next afternoon, he left work early. He arrived home at 4:30. He found Chloe in the nursery, folding tiny baby clothes, a serene, maternal look on her face that filled him with rage. He walked into the living room, pulled the brown envelope from his briefcase, and slapped it down on the coffee table. The sound was sharp, violent in the quiet house. "Sit down," he commanded. His voice was firm, no aggression, but all kindness was gone. Chloe looked at the envelope, then at him. The color drained from her face. She knew. She slowly, heavily, made her way to the couch, and Saturday. Daniel opened the envelope. He spread the photos out on the table, one by one, like a dealer laying out a losing hand. Who is this man? Chloe. She went pale, her hands trembling in her lap. She reached for a photo, but he was quicker, pulling it away. Who is he? He repeated, his voice colder this time. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting between the images. He's an old colleague. We met up a few times to talk. About work, about life. It was nothing. Nothing? Daniel said, the word dripping with sarcasm. Then explain this to me. He pushed the transcript of the video recording across the table. Explain why you're telling him you wish things were different. Explain why his hand is on yours. Explain why, 3 days before our son is due to be born, you are so damn insistent on giving him that man's name. He let the silence hang in the air, thick and heavy. Rowan Hayes. Your ex-boyfriend. Did you really think I was that stupid? Did you think I would just let you name our child after him and not question it? She finally broke. The tears came, silent at first, then turning into ragged, uncontrollable sobs. Daniel, it's not what you think. I swear, nothing physical ever happened. I never slept with him. He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the gray, drizzling street. Emotional betrayal is just as bad, Chloe, maybe worse, because you chose to share your heart with him. You chose to meet him, to confide in him, while I was right here, supporting you, taking care of you, building a future for our child. He turned back to face her. While I was painting the nursery, you were out there trying to repaint your past with another man. At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. Chloe's head snapped towards the door, her eyes wide with confusion and a dawning, sickening horror. Who was that? Daniel walked to the door and opened it. Rowan Hayes stood on the porch, looking uncomfortable, hands stuffed in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the ground. Daniel stepped aside, gesturing him in with an almost cordial motion. Come in, Rowan. We were just talking about you. Chloe tried to get up from the couch, but her body betrayed her. She remained trapped, half sitting, her eyes locked on Rowan as he stepped hesitantly into the room. Daniel, what have you done? Why is he here? Daniel ignored her. He looked at Rowan. Sit down. Rowan obeyed, sinking into the armchair, looking like a man walking to his own execution. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Daniel stood in the center of the room, the master of this grim little play. Rowan, he began, his voice dangerously quiet. Tell Chloe what you told me. Tell her what you talked about in those little coffee meetings. Rowan stammered, looking from Daniel to Chloe's tear-streaked face. I don't think. Just say it. Daniel cut in, his voice like steel. Rowan took a deep breath. She reached out to me a few months ago, he began, his voice low. She said she was having a hard time, that she felt lonely. She said you were a good guy, but that the connection was gone. That she needed someone she could really talk to. You're twisting everything. Chloe cried out, her voice high and desperate. I just wanted a friend. I never said I would leave Daniel. Rowan shook his head, gaining a sliver of resolve. Yes, you did, Chloe. More than once. You said you regretted breaking up. You said you wondered if we could try again if things were different. Daniel watched it all, a silent, grim spectator. He stepped closer to the couch, looking down at his wife. Did you honestly believe, he asked with terrifying calm, that I would let you give our son his name? That I was so blind I wouldn't notice? I love you, Daniel, she sobbed, her body shaking. I was just confused. The pregnancy, the fear. I just wanted to feel like myself again. He slowly shook his head, a look of final, profound understanding on his face. No, Chloe, you did this because you chose to. Because you decided what we had wasn't enough. And now, you will live with the consequences. He turned to Rowan. You can go, but know this. I am getting a paternity test the moment that baby is born. And if he's yours, you will be held legally and financially responsible. Rowan practically scrambled out of his chair, mumbled a barely audible apology, and fled. Daniel turned his attention back to Chloe, who sat broken on the couch. The marriage is over, he said, each word a carefully placed stone on the grave of their relationship. You can stay here until the baby is born. After that, you're leaving. I'm filing for divorce, and we will share custody. He held up a hand to stop her. Please. Don't bother. You destroyed the one thing that mattered. trust, and without that, there is no love. For the next 3 days, she tried. She cooked his favorite meals. She apologized endlessly. She begged. But Daniel treated her with a cold, distant politeness. He was a stranger living in his own home. He slept in the guest room. He ate alone. He did not fight. He simply erased her. On the third night, she went into labor. He drove her to the hospital in absolute silence. He stayed by her side through the entire ordeal, held her hand, wiped the sweat from her forehead. He did it not out of love, but out of a grim sense of duty. This was his responsibility. When the baby was born, a healthy boy, 7 pounds, with a full head of dark hair, the nurse placed him in Daniel's arm. And he felt a love so overwhelming, so pure, it washed away everything else. This was his son. He knew it in his soul. But when he looked over at Chloe, exhausted and pale in the hospital bed, he felt nothing. A complete and utter void. She was simply the vessel that had brought his child into the world. Nothing more. The next day, he requested the paternity test. Chloe didn't protest. The results came back a week later. Daniel was the father. He felt a profound sense of relief, not because he had truly doubted it, but because it was the final, clinical confirmation he needed. It closed the last door on their shared life. 2 weeks after the birth, he officially filed for divorce. The legal proceedings were swift. Daniel's lawyer was competent, ruthless. The photos, the video, the investigators' report, they were presented as clear evidence of emotional infidelity. In the state of Washington, it was enough. The judge was sympathetic. Custody would be shared, 50-50, but Daniel would keep the house. 3 months after their son was born, Chloe moved out. She got a small apartment across town, near her parents. Their interactions became transactional, brief handoffs of the baby at the door, with conversations limited to feeding schedules and doctor's appointments. As for Rowan, he vanished. Once he knew he was not the father, that there would be no consequences for him, he disappeared from Chloe's life completely. Blocked her number, deleted his social media. He ran like the coward Daniel always knew he was. Daniel, meanwhile, dedicated himself entirely to being a father. He restructured his whole life around his son. He learned to change a diaper with one hand. He memorized lullabies and sang them off-key but with a fierce love. He walked the floors with a crying baby at 3 in the morning, feeling not exhaustion, but purpose. He was rebuilding his life, on his own terms. It wasn't easy. There were nights, after he put the baby down in the crib, that he would stand there in the quiet nursery and feel a pang of sadness, not for what he had lost, but for the perfect family he had almost built. The dream Brooke had shattered, but he knew, with an unshakable certainty, that he had made the right choice. Dignity isn't negotiable. Trust, once broken so catastrophically, cannot be rebuilt. And his son deserved to be raised by a father who respected himself. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, on a bright Saturday afternoon, Daniel was at Gasworks Park. His son was asleep in his stroller. The city skyline glinted across Lake Union, and then he saw her. Chloe was sitting alone on a bench under a tree, staring out at the water. She looked smaller, diminished. She carried an invisible weight on her shoulders. For a moment, their eyes met across the green expanse. She gave him a small, sad smile, a ghost of a gesture. Daniel just gave a slight, formal nod in return. No anger, no malice, but no warmth, either. And then he turned and kept walking, pushing the stroller along the path, his focus entirely on his sleeping son. There was nothing left to say. They had both made their choices. Now, they were living with them. In the end, the baby's name was Samuel Daniel Thorne. He insisted on it. A tribute to the grandfather who represented integrity, combined with his own name. So his son would always know where he came from, who his father was. And every time Daniel said his son's name, he was reminded that some values are absolute. That some battles, no matter how painful, must be fought. For dignity, so you can look at yourself in the mirror and recognize the man staring back. Chloe, he imagined, would forever carry the weight of what she had thrown away. She had tried to honor a man who ran at the first sign of trouble, and in doing so, had destroyed her life with the man who would have given her everything. And that, perhaps, was the harshest and fairest punishment of all. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.